life sentences handed down, decades condemned to prison walls. Yet behind each verdict lies a trail of terror few can forget. A body burned alive on a desolate roadside, a grandmother drowned in silence, a mother butchered in her own kitchen, and a lover executed mid-slumber. Each scene carved permanent scars into Ohio's memory. Justice was served, yet the scars remain unhealed. And this is Inside Ohio's Most Notorious Female Killers, full list and shocking true crime cases. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Katrina Culberson. They thought silence would bury the truth, but the victim's final words exposed everything. In August 2012, a shocking crime unfolded in Ohio. The perpetrators were Katrina Marie Culberson, known as KC, just 20 years old at the time, Monica Washington, age 24, and LaFonce Dixon Jr., a 33-year-old drug dealer from Canton. Their victim was Celeste Franzman, a 29-year-old woman described by friends as misunderstood yet kind-hearted, someone battling addiction but still searching for stability. Investigators later pieced together the grim timeline. On the morning of August 26th, the trio kidnapped Celeste in Canton. She was beaten, choked with a tow strap, and driven for more than 90 minutes to a remote wildlife area in Muskingum County. Prosecutors later emphasized how deliberate this journey was, showing premeditation. At the secluded site, the attackers doused her with gasoline and set her on fire, leaving her to die. But Celeste refused to vanish quietly. Around 8:30 a.m., a passing driver, Mark Bretz, noticed her staggering along Route 208. Despite burns covering over 70% of her body, she summoned the strength to name her attackers before collapsing. "She told me 3 names," Bretz testified, recalling her desperate but determined voice. Those names gave investigators their breakthrough. Celeste survived 2 more days in a hospital, placed into a medically induced coma, before succumbing to her injuries on August 28th. Her bravery, investigators later said, ensured her killers would never walk free again. Police arrested Katrina Culberson only days later. Court documents revealed a destructive relationship between her and the victim, entangled in drugs and prostitution. Friends described Culberson as controlling and violent, calling her pure evil. Prosecutors argued that Dixon wrongly believed Celeste was a police informant in a drug raid against him. Canton's police chief publicly confirmed that this suspicion was false. She had never been an informant. In the Muskingum County courtroom, the brutality of the crime shook even seasoned officials. "This is among the top 3 most horrific cases I've seen," the prosecutor told reporters. Culberson and Washington accepted plea deals, avoiding the death penalty but sealing their fates with life sentences. Dixon went to trial, maintained his innocence, yet was convicted of aggravated murder, kidnapping, and arson. Jurors spared him the death penalty, sentencing him instead to life imprisonment. Community reaction was visceral. Friends of Celeste filled the courtroom, praising her strength and identifying her killers. One called it her last word, a final act of courage that brought justice. Local media labeled it one of the most disturbing murders in recent county history. From this tragedy come warnings. First, destructive relationships fueled by addiction can become lethal. Seek support before cycles of abuse deepen. Second, false accusations in drug-driven circles ignite violence. Suspicion without truth destroys lives. Third, trust your instincts. If someone controls, threatens, or isolates you, leaving may be the only path to survival. Celeste Franzman's case reminds us that even in her last moments, truth endured. And truth, when spoken, can outlive fire. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Heidy Matheny. They shared dinner and ice cream, but what followed turned an ordinary evening into a shocking crime in Ohio. In November 2022, police in Eaton, Ohio, confronted an unimaginable confession. The woman standing before them was 35-year-old Heidy Matheny, who calmly admitted she had just killed her own grandmother. The victim was Alice Matheny, 93 years old, a woman described by Heidy herself as a perfect freaking grandma. Their relationship was close, but it had become strained under the crushing burden of caregiving. Investigators learned that just 1 day before the murder, a doctor had recommended Alice be placed in a nursing home. Heidy, facing financial strain and overwhelmed by stress, told police the family could not afford such care. She later said she wanted her grandmother to be at rest and not continue living with daily panic attacks. The sequence of violence began after a shared meal. As Alice stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes, Heidy forced her head into soapy water, holding it down until she stopped blowing bubbles. Unsure if she was dead, Heidy dragged her frail grandmother to the couch. When Alice began showing signs of life, Heidy filled the bathtub, stripped her grandmother's clothing, and submerged her for 15 agonizing minutes. The autopsy would later confirm broken ribs, a fractured sternum, and deep bruising around her neck and arms. After the killing, Heidy climbed out a window to avoid neighbors and walked directly to the Preble County Sheriff's Office. At 5:55 p.m., she confessed without hesitation. Detectives recalled her words, "I lost my S. I just snapped." There was no attempt to flee, no cover-up, only surrender. The courtroom proceedings moved quickly. Initially pleading not guilty, she later changed her plea to guilty of murder. In March 2023, the judge imposed a mandatory Ohio sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Family members were present in the courtroom but remained silent, their grief unspoken. When the verdict was read, Heidy stood in her prison jumpsuit, her posture slouched, eyes downcast, the image of resignation captured in local media coverage that spread across crime news outlets and YouTube true crime commentary. Community reaction reflected shock more than outrage. Neighbors questioned how caregiving stress and untreated mental illness could twist into something so violent. Prosecutors called it one of the most brutal domestic crimes in recent county history. International outlets picked up the story, citing the disturbing details of a granddaughter who killed the very woman she described with love. This case leaves haunting lessons. Caregiver stress without support can become dangerous. NC6, families must seek help before pressure overwhelms. Financial burdens around elder care are real, but violence is never the solution. Resources exist, though often underused. And finally, mental health struggles left untreated can explode into tragedy. Early intervention can save both caregivers and those they protect. The murder of Alice Matheny reminds us, even love twisted by stress can end in violence if cries for help are ignored. Number 3. Erica Stefanko. Under the cover of an ordinary pizza order, a deadly plan was already in motion. In June 2012, Ohio mother of 4 Erica Stefanko, then known as Erica Lyon, orchestrated one of the state's most disturbing murder plots. At the time, she was married to Chad Cobb, the ex-boyfriend of 25-year-old Army veteran and Domino's pizza delivery driver Ashley Biggs. Cobb and Biggs shared a daughter and were locked in what prosecutors called a fiercely contested custody battle. According to court records, Stefanko openly disliked Biggs, and her resentment would soon escalate into a premeditated crime. On the night of June 20th, Stefanko placed a fake pizza order under a false name to lure Biggs to a closed business in New Franklin. When Biggs arrived, Cobb ambushed her, using a stun gun before brutally beating and strangling her with a 4-foot industrial zip tie. Prosecutors later revealed that Stefanko followed in a separate vehicle as Cobb drove Biggs's car, with the victim's body inside, to a remote cornfield in Wayne County. There, the car was abandoned. Police launched an immediate investigation after Biggs failed to return from her delivery. Her body was discovered the next day, bound with multiple zip ties. Cobb was arrested soon after, hiding in nearby woods, his clothes stained with blood. Though he quickly confessed, Stefanko avoided arrest for years. It wasn't until 2019, when a secret recording captured her admitting her role in the plot, that prosecutors finally charged her. The courtroom became the stage for a high-profile trial that gripped Ohio. In 2020, a jury convicted Stefanko of aggravated murder and murder. Her conviction was later overturned on appeal in 2022 due to a pandemic-era ruling that improperly allowed Cobb to testify remotely by video. But prosecutors retried the case, and in January 2024, she was found guilty once again. At her sentencing, Judge Amy Corrigal-Jones addressed the brutality and premeditation, handing down life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The victim's daughter, now a teenager, told Stefanko through tears, "You don't deserve to be called a mother." Those words left the convicted woman visibly shaken as she stood handcuffed in her prison uniform, eyes fixed on the ground. Public reaction was intense. Court TV broadcast the retrial, and the case fueled debates about the limits of remote testimony during COVID-era proceedings. Legal analysts said the appellate reversal highlighted constitutional safeguards, while community members focused on the raw pain inflicted on the Biggs family. From this tragedy, lessons emerge. Jealousy and resentment in fractured families can escalate into violence when left unchecked. DOAs always seek mediation, not revenge. Online orders, rides, or deliveries can be exploited as traps. Verify details before responding. And most importantly, when controlling or threatening behaviors appear, take them seriously and act before escalation becomes irreversible. The murder of Ashley Biggs shows how an ordinary act of work became fatal and how silence in the face of danger can cost a life. Number 4. Akira Fletcher. What happens when a fight spills onto social media and the whole world becomes a witness to a killing? In July 2024, the streets of Avondale in Cincinnati became the scene of a deadly confrontation that was filmed, shared, and debated online. At the center was 23-year-old Akira Fletcher. Prosecutors say she murdered 29-year-old Neema Norton. Fletcher, however, insists it was self-defense, and the evidence began with her own phone camera. The two women already had a violent history. Months earlier, Norton had been accused of pointing a gun at Fletcher, threatening to shoot her. That unresolved case lingered in Hamilton County Court. Then, on July 12th, a parking lot argument turned violent. Fletcher sat inside her car, phone recording as Norton and another woman approached. In the first clip, Fletcher accused them of throwing rocks, slashing her tires, and shattering her windows. As the argument continued, one of the women mentioned that Fletcher was pregnant. Fletcher returned to her vehicle, starting to drive away. But the fight wasn't over. In a second video, her driver's side window was already smashed. Norton and her cousin approached again, voices raised, movements aggressive. Fletcher taunted them to hit me again. When one leaned into the car, Fletcher pulled her gun and fired 4 shots. Norton collapsed, later rushed to the hospital, where she died in late August after weeks on life support. The second woman survived. The case took a dramatic turn when Fletcher posted both videos on Facebook, tagging local news outlets and writing that she acted in self-defense. "I was being attacked," she claimed, hoping the footage would sway public opinion. Initially, some investigators agreed. Cincinnati police first treated the case as possible self-defense under Ohio's Stand Your Ground law, which does not require retreat when threatened inside one's vehicle. But the grand jury saw it differently. On August 30th, Fletcher was indicted on aggravated murder, and felonious assault. She was arrested the following day and ordered held without bond. Standing in court in her jail uniform, Fletcher listened silently as the charges were read, her eyes fixed on the floor, the viral videos that once carried her defense now serving as evidence against her. The community reaction was divided. Legal experts like defense attorney Jay Clark told reporters, based on the videos, she has a solid self-defense case. Yet prosecutors argued that recording, taunting, and then pulling the trigger crossed the line into criminal intent. Social media fueled the debate, spreading the footage nationwide and sparking discussions about race, gender, and the scope of Stand Your Ground in Ohio. From this case, the lessons are clear. Heated conflicts can spiral when weapons are present. Avoid escalation before violence begins. Posting evidence online may shape public opinion but cannot erase legal responsibility. And unresolved disputes left to fester only grow more dangerous with time. The shooting of Neema Norton forces a question we cannot ignore. When fear meets force, who decides what is justice? Number 5. Stormy Delehanty. A night of celebration turned into a crime scene that stunned investigators across Ohio and beyond. On the 4th of July 2020, in Deerfield Township, 28-year-old Stormy Danielle Nicole Delehanty fatally stabbed her husband, 34-year-old Roman Rochelle Hupkin. Their relationship had begun just 2 years earlier, after meeting at a bar. He proposed within 8 months, and their life together was fueled by heavy drinking. But what began as a whirlwind romance collapsed under alcohol abuse, jealousy, and violence. According to trial testimony, the couple argued after Delehanty found a photo of another woman in a towel saved on her husband's phone. What started as shouting spiraled into physical aggression. Delehanty claimed Roman lunged at her, pinned her down, and threw her hard enough to make her black out. Prosecutors described what happened next as deliberate and brutal. Roman was stabbed multiple times. 2 wounds, one piercing his jugular vein, another penetrating his lung, were independently fatal. The following day revealed disturbing choices. Prosecutors told jurors that Delehanty purchased cleaning supplies, a saw, hedge trimmers, and a duffel bag, suggesting she intended to dismember the body. Instead, the corpse remained wrapped in blankets in their room. It was discovered on July 6 by a 16-year-old relative who immediately called 911. By then, Delehanty had fled. Detectives tracked her across the country as the case became a nationwide search. On July 11, she was arrested without incident at the Boulder Station Casino in Las Vegas. With her belongings, investigators found a handwritten note. On July 4th, I killed my husband accidentally. In Warren County Court, Delehanty admitted her traumatic past, sexual abuse, foster care, witnessing her mother's violent assault, and her mother's suicide when she was just 14. She acknowledged excessive drinking, saying she was intoxicated and remembered little. Her defense argued she acted in a sudden fit of rage and sought a lesser conviction of voluntary manslaughter. Prosecutors countered with evidence of her actions after the stabbing, portraying them as signs of clear intent to conceal the crime. The jury deliberated and returned a guilty verdict on all charges: murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. In March 2021, Judge Timothy Tepe sentenced her to 18 years to life in prison. At sentencing, he noted contradictions in her words, saying, "You called him a monster, then later a special person. Your sincerity is in question." Stormy stood in her prison uniform, her head lowered, her expression unreadable as the punishment was announced. Roman's family in Russia expressed their grief through a victim's advocate, calling him their only son and thanking investigators for ensuring accountability. The case drew national attention, not just for its brutality but for the dramatic manhunt that ended in Las Vegas. Tragedies like this leave heavy warnings. Arguments fueled by alcohol often escalate into irreversible violence. Buying time with lies or flight only deepens guilt, and trauma, if left unaddressed, can shape destructive choices that end in prison. Stormy Delehanty's case forces reflection. When pain meets rage, the line between victim and perpetrator can blur forever. Number 6. Mia Shamis. It began as a simple meeting in broad daylight, but within seconds, 2 young men lay dead inside their car. On the 5th of April 2016, in East Columbus, Ohio, a confrontation born from a failed drug deal escalated into murder. The central figures were 2 one-year-old Connor Jeffries and his girlfriend, 1 9-year-old Mia Shamis. Their victims were 2 one-year-old James Miller Jr. and 2 0-year-old Gary Ashton Francis, both recent graduates from the same local high school. Prosecutors said the motive was retaliation. Nang Cage. Jeffries believed the 2 had once paid him with counterfeit money. That afternoon, Shamis drove Jeffries to a prearranged meeting behind an Enterprise rental car lot on Tussing Road. Surveillance cameras captured what happened next. Jeffries exited the car he arrived in, walked directly to the victim's parked vehicle, and opened fire. Both men were shot repeatedly, never able to defend themselves. He couldn't even raise his hands, Miller's family later told reporters. The pair fled in a silver Chevy Malibu, triggering an immediate police search. Tips poured in, and by April 6, investigators had tracked the suspects down. Both were arrested without incident, ending a manhunt that had unsettled the East Columbus community. The brutality of the killings left no doubt for prosecutors. Franklin County authorities charged Jeffries with multiple counts, including aggravated murder and tampering with evidence. He ultimately pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 of tampering, accepting 2 consecutive life sentences with the possibility of parole after 33 years. Shamis's role was different but still critical. She admitted to driving Jeffries to and from the scene and entered a plea deal for involuntary manslaughter. In exchange for her testimony, she received 7 years in prison, with credit for time already served. In April 2017, she stood before the court, dressed in a beige prison uniform, her face pale and emotionless as the sentence was handed down. The victims' families filled the courtroom. Gianna Miller, James's twin sister, spoke through tears. "As a twin, you have a partner, and I don't have my partner anymore." His grandmother, Gail McQueen, drew a stark comparison. "We go to the cemetery to talk to my grandson, while Jeffrey's parents can still see theirs." Gary Francis's mother, Wendy Martin, submitted a letter reflecting on the dreams her son would never fulfill. The community reaction was grief mixed with anger. While some acknowledged the victim's involvement in drugs, their families emphasized that no one has the right to take another person's life. The case reinforced the dangers of disputes in the drug world, especially when young lives collide with violence. From this tragedy emerge vital lessons. Retaliation never restores dignity, it only multiplies loss. Young adults caught in the lure of fast money face risks that end in prison or a grave. And those who aid violence, even without pulling the trigger, still bear legal responsibility that lasts for years. The murders of James Miller and Gary Francis remind us, choices made in minutes can destroy futures forever. Number 7. Briana Benson. A feud that began with online threats ended with tragedy on a Cincinnati street, captured by dashcam and witnessed by strangers. On the 26th of March 2017, 20-year-old Briana Benson drove downtown after receiving a call from her younger sister, Maya. The dispute had started weeks earlier, with threats exchanged through Instagram and Snapchat between Maya and a childhood friend of Maddie Hart. That digital hostility exploded into a physical brawl, drawing Benson directly into the violence. Witnesses told police that Benson entered the fight with fury. Prosecutors said she punched 18-year-old Maddie Hart, dragged her by the hair, and stomped on her face in the middle of Walnut Street. After the fight ended, Hart's keys ended up inside Benson's car. Benson left briefly but then returned, behind the wheel of her vehicle, with Hart demanding her belongings back. What followed was recorded by an Uber driver's dashcam. As Hart pounded on the car, demanding her keys, Benson turned her front tires deliberately toward her. Instead of reversing or driving away, she accelerated. The impact knocked Hart to the ground, and the car dragged her nearly 90 feet. She was rushed to a hospital, placed in intensive care, but after 4 days she died from multiple blunt force injuries, including broken ribs and severe trauma to her lungs and head. Investigators quickly obtained the dashcam footage. A reconstruction expert testified that Benson had at least 4 safe options that would not have hit Hart, but she chose the one that did. Prosecutors argued it was intentional, the final act of anger after the street fight. Benson claimed in her defense that she panicked, saying she was scared and trying to flee, but the jury was unconvinced. The trial lasted less than 2 weeks. In February 2018, a Hamilton County jury found her guilty of murder, aggravated vehicular homicide, felonious assault, and leaving the scene of an accident. Judge Robert Winkler sentenced her to 18 years to life in prison, also imposing a lifetime driver's license suspension. At sentencing, Benson stood in her orange prison uniform, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast, her face void of expression as the words sealed her fate. Meanwhile, the victim's parents gave emotional statements. Jeanine Hart told the court, "I can't hug my daughter anymore," while Steve Hart said simply, "We are exhausted. We need to grieve." The case attracted local and national attention because it began with a social media feud and ended in real-world violence, recorded on video. For Maddie Hart's family, appeals that followed only prolonged their pain, but each was denied, with the conviction upheld. From this tragedy, hard lessons emerge. Online feuds can escalate into deadly encounters when pride outweighs reason. Vehicles are lethal weapons when used in anger, leaving no room for second chances. And returning to a fight already over transforms conflict into crime. The death of Maddie Hart reminds us, unchecked anger, once set in motion, can leave permanent scars on every family it touches. Number 8. Elizabeth Lecron. It started with online obsessions, but it ended with federal agents seizing weapons before blood could ever be spilled. In December 2018, authorities in Toledo, Ohio, arrested 23-year-old Elizabeth B. Lecron and her boyfriend, Vincent Armstrong, both immersed in a disturbing subculture that glorified mass murder. Prosecutors later revealed that their fascination with killers like the Columbine shooters and Charleston church gunman Dylan Roof escalated into detailed plans for an attack of their own. Investigators uncovered months of preparation. Lecron exchanged letters with Roof, attempted to send him Nazi literature, and posted on Tumblr under names like Charleston Church Miracle. Armstrong wrote chilling words in his journal, "I have a vision to kill." Together, they referred to their planned attack as D-Day. The targets were varied and chilling. They discussed bombing a Toledo bar, destroying a Georgia pipeline, and attacking a livestock farm. Lecron even considered striking her own workplace, believing it polluted a local river. Prosecutors later disclosed that she bought combat boots specifically because she thought they would not slip on all the blood after the killings. Their preparations were not abstract. Surveillance showed them practicing at a gun range, while undercover agents documented their talk of pipe bombs. On the 8th of December 2018, Lecron purchased 2 pounds of black powder and hundreds of screws, delivering them to what she believed was a co-conspirator. 2 days later, federal agents moved in. The search that followed uncovered an arsenal, an AK-47, multiple shotguns, handguns, ammunition, a tactical vest, a gas mask, and bomb-making instructions. The evidence left no doubt of premeditation. As U.S. Attorney Justin Herdman later told the press, she was deadly serious about her intent to commit violence. In U.S. District Court, both defendants pleaded guilty in August 2019. Lecron admitted to conspiracy to provide material support to terrorists and transporting explosives in interstate commerce. Armstrong pleaded guilty to conspiracy to transport or receive an explosive with intent to kill or injure. At her sentencing in November, Lecron appeared somber, her dark hair framing a pale face, eyes downcast as she listened to the judge impose a 15-year federal prison term, followed by lifetime supervision. Armstrong was sentenced the following month to 6 years in prison. The case sent shockwaves through Ohio and drew national headlines, highlighting the dangers of online radicalization. Law enforcement credited a concerned tipster for preventing mass casualties, praising public vigilance. See something, say something became the theme repeated by federal agents, who emphasized that terrorism was not confined to foreign actors, it could originate in an American neighborhood, fueled by extremist online communities. From this thwarted plot, the lessons resonate clearly. Online glorification of violence is not harmless, it can evolve into real-world conspiracies. Friends, family, and even strangers must take warning signs seriously and alert authorities. And finally, access to weapons and explosives, combined with obsession, creates a deadly formula that can only be intercepted with vigilance. The story of Elizabeth Lecron and Vincent Armstrong is proof. Intervention can stop terror before it begins, but silence can make it unstoppable. Number 9. Sidney Powell. A phone call meant to confirm tuition payments instead exposed a secret that would end in tragedy inside an Akron home. On the 3rd of March 2020, 19-year-old Sidney Powell, once a student at the University of Mount Union, murdered her own mother, Brenda Powell. Brenda was a respected child life specialist at Akron Children's Hospital, known for her compassion after nearly 3 decades of service. Sidney, however, had been expelled months earlier for failing classes, a truth she kept hidden until the day of the attack. That afternoon, Sidney's father discovered he could not access the university portal to pay tuition. Pressed for answers, she confessed to her expulsion. When Brenda returned home and called the university to confirm the details, officials on the other end suddenly heard loud thuds, screams, and then silence. Alarmed, they called back. This time, a woman pretending to be Brenda answered "NAH," but the voice was Sidney's. When confronted, she hung up, and the school quickly notified police. What unfolded inside the home was described in court as one of Summit County's most brutal crimes. Prosecutors said Sidney first struck her mother with a cast-iron skillet, then switched to a steak knife, stabbing her nearly 30 times in the neck. Brenda was rushed to the hospital, but could not survive her injuries. To mislead investigators, Sidney shattered a window to stage the scene as a break-in. When police arrived, she claimed an intruder had killed her mother, but forensic evidence quickly exposed the cover-up. The courtroom battle centered on Sidney's mental health. Her defense argued she suffered from schizophrenia, citing 3 experts who diagnosed her with schizoaffective disorder. Prosecutors countered with testimony from Dr. Sylvia Obradovich, who told jurors her behavior didn't add up to schizophrenia and that she clearly understood right from wrong. Assistant Prosecutor Brian Stano emphasized her deliberate actions, she had to switch weapons, and she had to keep going. In September 2023, a jury convicted her of murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. Judge Kelly McLaughlin sentenced her to life in prison with parole eligibility after 15 years. In court, Sidney stood in her prison uniform, her face blank, staring at the floor as the words "life in prison" echoed in the chamber. Yet the case did not end there. In December 2024, the 9th District Court of Appeals overturned her conviction, ruling that the trial judge improperly denied her the right to present surrebuttal evidence in support of her insanity defense. Prosecutors have since asked the Ohio Supreme Court to reinstate her conviction, warning that the appellate decision could rewrite a century of precedent. The case drew widespread discussion about the balance between accountability and mental illness. From it, sobering lessons arise. Secrets, when buried, can explode with devastating consequences. Cover-ups often collapse under the weight of evidence. And mental illness, if left untreated, can transform family homes into crime scenes. The murder of Brenda Powell leaves us with a chilling reminder: hidden truths can fracture families and destroy lives beyond repair. Number 10. Deborah L. Frazier. A staged 911 call about masked intruders concealed a far darker truth waiting inside a quiet Zanesville apartment. On the 9th of August 2023, 35-year-old Deborah L. Frazier murdered her longtime boyfriend, 66-year-old Thomas Waddell. The two had met years earlier while working at a Kroger store and lived together in an on-again, off-again relationship. By all accounts, Waddell was a kind man, a handyman who loved sports and adored his 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Behind closed doors, however, Frazier was orchestrating a deception that prosecutors later described as days of planning. The motive was financial. Detectives found that the couple's joint bank account had dwindled to just $2,000. Frazier created a fake email account to pose as a bank fraud investigator, even manipulating another man, her secret boyfriend of 10 years, into calling Waddell under this false identity. Meanwhile, her phone searches revealed chilling intent: how to load a revolver pistol, worst place to get hit in the head, and how long does GSR stay on skin. On the evening of August 9, as Waddell sat in his recliner, prosecutors say Frazier stood behind him, raised his own .22 caliber revolver, and executed him with a single shot to the back of the head. She then wrapped his body in trash bags, a comforter, and duct tape, hiding him in a back room. More than 12 hours later, Frazier dialed 911. Crying into the phone, she claimed she had returned home to find the apartment ransacked by masked intruders. While dispatchers listened, a quiet gunshot rang out. Moments later, she insisted she had been shot. Officers arrived to find her with a self-inflicted wound to her leg, but the crime scene told a different story. Nothing of value was missing, and the home appeared orderly. Inside, investigators discovered Waddell's body, concealed but unmistakably murdered. Muskingum County detectives moved quickly. Forensic analysis confirmed her story of a home invasion was fabricated. Her internet history, staged cover-up, and financial motive all pointed to deliberate execution. Prosecutor Ron Welch told reporters, "This was purposeful, this was planned." In March 2024, Deborah Frazier pleaded guilty in Muskingum County Common Pleas Court to murder with a firearm specification, tampering with evidence, and gross abuse of a corpse. At sentencing, she stood in a tan prison jumpsuit, her eyes fixed downward as the judge imposed life in prison. The community's shock lingered, particularly because Waddell was remembered as a man who gave freely to others. While his family chose not to speak in court, his obituary described a grandfather who absolutely adored his children and grandchildren, leaving behind a legacy stolen by betrayal. From this case, hard lessons emerge. Financial desperation does not excuse murder. Lies, no matter how elaborate, eventually collapse under evidence. And when partners conceal double lives, danger often hides just beneath the surface. The execution of Thomas Waddell by Deborah Frazier remains a stark reminder: deception and greed can dismantle even the most ordinary lives. Every case we've uncovered tonight carries a chilling truth: violence doesn't emerge in shadows alone, it often grows inside everyday lives. From jealousy to greed, from hidden secrets to dangerous obsessions, Ohio's most notorious female killers remind us that the unimaginable can happen anywhere. But this is only the beginning. There are more untold stories, more shocking trials, and more moments where justice is tested. Don't miss what comes next. Subscribe now to Justice Reversed and hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to see our next deep dive into true crime.